Welcome, you guys. Sorry for this slightly odd Aleo hang time. It's because the team is at ECC in Paris. Most of the team, not everyone. And we have the Aleo and Noma event tomorrow, actually. So if anyone is in Paris, please come and join us. I know some ambassadors are in Paris and they're planning on going, which is great. And if you're in Paris, we can drop the link in the Q&A chat and you can register. I'll be giving a talk. Anthony will be giving a talk. Alex will be giving a talk. Howard will be giving a talk. So it's going to be fun. But that's kind of happening in the entire afternoon tomorrow, and so I didn't want to miss a week of chatting with you guys and giving some updates and especially this is a fun community call. We're going to do things differently, and I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, so we really wanted to kind of bring everyone up. Okay, so as you can see, I'm inviting Matt White up to the stage. And the fun thing about this community call is, we've been trying to kind of add a little bit of flavor to our AMAs and our community calls and thinking like, okay, what can we do that's going to be exciting for you guys? So, each week is a new thing. And so we've brought on engineers. We've kind of integrated Alex's tech talks. And recently we decided, why not give the floor to you guys and to people who work with us outside of even the Discord? So for this community call, I contacted Josh, who should be somewhere. I'm not sure if he is on yet. He is. Can you bring him on? So we have Josh, and then we also have Matt. And Matt will they both are here to kind of talk about Josh is going to talk kind of about private social networks and what he's seen and what he's thinking about in terms of private social networks. And Matt will, there he is. And Matt will talk similarly in that field, but also kind of talk about what he's seeing being built in that field and whatnot. So without further ado, I know we don't have too long. Why don't I want to let both you guys just introduce yourselves. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. This is so exciting and fun. So Matt, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and more information like that.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Sweet. Well, thanks for the intro, Viv. Hey, Aleo community. This is super exciting to do this event. I've really enjoyed all the other events. And a bit of background on me. I am a co-founder of a small group still in stealth right now called Medici Collective. And what we're doing is building out a lot of privacy tools for DAOs. As you could tell, that may be very relevant to Aleo, who we are before that. We were actually part of some of the folks that helped with Constitution DAO and had kind of been in the blockchain space since 2018. So we aren't OGs, but we have been here for a bit. And yeah, we are super ecstatic, obviously, from Constitution DAO related things. Not sure if everyone knows the story, but some folks gathered together in November to raise money to purchase a copy of the Constitution, but the amount of money that they raised was public, and whenever they tried to buy the copy of the Constitution, someone was able to bid $1 higher than the amount that they raised because it's public. So that drew us to look at what privacy options were there. We got connected with the Aleo team at ETH Denver and started building on them since. So that's a bit about me, and yeah, it's been very fun designing in the privacy space and can't wait to talk more about it.
I guess I'll go. I'm Josh. I'm one of the maestros here. I've been working with Aleo for a few months now, since the end of last year. And I got really interested in, particularly in what how social networks could evolve with Web3 and with privacy. Um, I think that I have the feeling that I think Web3 is the future, but I also think that with zero knowledge proofs are kind of the missing element that are going to make Web3 much more useful going forward, and we're going to find a lot more useful projects to work on. And so I'm excited to. That's why I got excited around social networks and what I found is both exciting and that it's kind of a wide open field. So I look forward to talking more about it.
Nice. Thank you both. Yeah, that's a fun story about the Constitution. I don't think I heard exactly that that's what kind of got you guys started. So it's one of those classic moments where you're like, oh, what a cool idea. And then, oh, shoot, the fact that everyone can see everything is so harmful to this because you can just derail all progress. So I'll let Matt kind of take the first stab for, however long you want to chat. I know you're like often in the space kind of it doesn't necessarily need to be focused on private social networks, which I know Josh is going to talk more about, but more like it can focus on that and more just like general projects that you're seeing that you're excited about and where you think kind of this whole new privacy realm is really going and where there could be like pitfalls and also upsides.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to frame the question. I think that there's very obvious upsides from the example that I just gave, but also a lot of pitfalls that as you start building um, with privacy, you start to run into. So, um, one example of benefit is the one that I just mentioned about like Constitution DAO, and obviously it's a clear case of things probably would have been different should that one, you know, privacy feature been available to them. So that starts to get you thinking, okay, well, privacy can be a whole feature, a totally new design space. One thing that's not thought about though is all the things that actually rely on complete transparency right now, and what happens when you kind of take away some of that transparency. So one thing that we've run into, it's kind of like a little foot gun, is if you are not planning on running your own server to store data, but you're planning on indexing it from the blockchain, if all of that data is private and encrypted and you just have proofs that something ran the way that smart contract logic or whatever that program's logic is, ran properly, and you just have a verification of that proof without any data on chain to index from, you start to run into a bit of a gotcha moment where you're like, oh shoot, we were planning on indexing this data to be able to show users. How exactly do we solve this with privacy still in mind? So that's one area that I think could be interesting, especially with respect to private social networks. If you're trying to discover someone's profile and they're completely private, I mean, how do you even search or index over something like that? So that's probably one big area I can elaborate on more so, but I'd like to can pass it off from here.
Yeah, totally. And I think what's interesting about that is it kind of brings up the question of like, what is the point of a social network, right? Because that's exactly like, if you can't search, if you can't index, well, is that like purposefully done? What do people want when they're on a social network? What are the privacy elements that people want? And Josh, this might fall well into kind of what you're going to discuss as well.
Yeah. So the one thing I think about is it's hard to imagine what social networks are going to look like on Web3 because it's such a new field that like I mean for instance there's Mastodon, which is probably I would say maybe the most successful so far Web3 ish a platform out there, and it allows you to just copy your own or start up your own network and not be part of a bigger network. So you see like this kind of metastasizing where you can create a network with your own rules. If you don't want certain content on there, you can ban that on your network. If you don't like the rules of somebody's, you can just copy the source code and start your own network with your own rules. That's one way to look at it. But so there's a lot of things that you can start thinking of, like problems with Web 2, with like, the Facebooks and those sorts of things where you have centralized control and this conglomerate where, let's say you're on Facebook. Well, you might like
pottery, but you might also be really into some politician that is very unpopular with most people. So people that you want to talk about pottery with, they won't connect with you because they get mad because you support some politician that they hate. So with privacy, you can share only the parts of your profile that you want to share. So let's say you're looking for other people that are into pottery. Well, you're gonna broadcast that you're into pottery, that you're looking for other people that are into pottery, but like nothing about your politics or religion or things that are like hot button issues that like privacy will allow you to not have to worry about those. So you connect on the things that you like, and the things that are controversial, you can leave those for another network. And what it would do, if you think about Twitter, one of the things people get mad about Twitter is they want to say whatever they want to say, but then they get mad when other people do that. Well, Twitter, you could have a version of Twitter on Web3 where people opt into, they say, hey, I'm looking for people to argue with. And so like a little light comes on if it sees that you're, let's say you use AI to determine which side you are on issues. Say, hey, this person opposes you, but they're looking to argue. If people who are looking to argue and people who aren't looking to argue are kind of separated out, or at least there's some signal, there's some way to know who wants to argue, the experience could be made much better. And the thing is with the Web2 social media sites we have now, it's kind of all or none. So the big thing with looking at what Web3 can do is social networking can be really broken down into smaller pieces and around certain things. Like, for instance, the one idea I have is, how do you have people who are in Aleo? How do you find each other? And let's say you're a great back-end developer and you're looking for a front-end developer for an app that you want to make. How do you find those people? And so one of the things is the problem is there's this thing on chain. Well, what I'm looking into is a decentralized Oracle, making some sort of Oracle that which is where you would handle an Oracle is basically handling the off-chain calculations, and it can maintain state. How do you interact with that Oracle to find other people? And I'll talk more about this later, how I actually think about it. But how can you interact with an Oracle in a zero knowledge way, so that way you can be matched with people without understanding how to go through the blockchain and find that state on a blockchain? Because the other thing is if you start posting it to the chain, you have to pay for those transactions as well. So with the Oracle, you can keep your costs down as well. And again, it's hard to envision if there's going to be some way that we come up with that allows you to store this stuff on the chain cheaply and efficiently. But for now, I can't envision it. But it's exciting to think that we are going to come up with ways to do this stuff.
Totally. Yeah, it is exciting. I think an interesting question too. I don't know. Do either of you guys know? I think it's called Orbis. It's like a decentralized Twitter. And what's funny about that is, like, kind of the curse of a social network is that you need the community on the social network, right? So the point of connecting is if you have a lot of people to connect with. And I often ask, do you guys use like alternative kind of, it doesn't even need to be social networks necessarily, but I'm sure you guys are big on Signal and stuff. But, do you find yourself actively like hating the social networks that are currently easily available? Or do you find yourself kind of thinking like, well, at this point, this is what we have?
I think the main types of social network that are out there were interesting when they were new. But they've become a lot, there's a lot of spam. It's hard to find the signal in the noise. It's hard to get one set of rules for an entire large community. Like, I used to love Reddit because you were able to find a lot of information on there, but now you're finding a lot of conversations, like a lot of people left because they would get in trouble for saying certain things, that there's an ever-changing rules on what you're allowed to say, which words you're allowed to say, what positions you're allowed to have on certain things. Same thing with Twitter cracking down on people who are like, let's say anti-vax. Well, there's you can't just come down on one side of an issue and just say, well, you totally can't talk about this whole subject of stuff, because it ends up creeping into other things whenever you start picking and choosing what positions people can have. And I've noticed that the communities on the larger platforms have kind of the free thinking people, the people that are avant-garde kind of left, and I haven't found where they've gone. It just seems like there's a vacuum right now where there's people are looking for like a new thing, which I think is going to be something on Web3. And I don't think it's going to be as centralized as before, because like we're seeing a lot of the drama that you see on social media is because everybody's forced into the same uh, uh, place, and everybody's trying to have one conversation, and there's billions of people on the planet and we're all diverse. So I haven't found anywhere that I really like I used to like, say, like Reddit. I used to love Reddit. And it's just
Yeah, totally.
it's not the same. There's a lot of spam on it now. It's hard to,
Yeah, I think you bring up a really interesting point of the beginning, right? And it's like at the beginning, Gmail, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, like none of these were inherently bad. And in fact, we didn't know at what scale they were going to grow. And maybe it's naive to think, but I'm not sure like Mark Zuckerberg necessarily knew at what scale Facebook was going to grow, right? And so when you kind of think of that position, and then you have people who, I think there was something like 9% of adults, some research group did a study on how many people read terms and conditions, right, of apps and whatnot. And they found, I think this was in 2019, they found that 9% of adults read them, which is, I was actually surprised, more than I would have thought. But still, you have 91% of people that just accept these and move on. And the truth is, it's like very, very inconvenient to care about privacy right now. It's very inconvenient to decide that you're going to read one term and condition and then relate it to another terms and condition and see kind of where the overlap are and which app you want to eventually use to listen to music. And so I think it's a really interesting kind of point that we're at. And Matt, I'd be curious to hear if like this is kind of a universal feeling of like we have so much potential, and kind of like let's restart Web3 from the start with like privacy by default. Where like Web2, we didn't know enough, and it ended up kind of becoming a bit of a shit show because we didn't focus on it. Right now, we're kind of in an opportunity where we can make these moves. And Matt, I'm curious, do people feel this way? Do people think this way? What's kind of the general sentiment around the projects you see?
Yeah, no, I mean, I honestly, so as I was mentioning, like not directly working on these, but I do have, I actually had a friend and was helping build like the command line for DSO, which is another kind of like Orbis-like thing, but I think it was like a little bit older. I think it started in 2017, but DSO stands for Decentralized Social Network, and they basically were trying to attack like, okay, how can Web3, what are some pain points that people have in social media? It's kind of like the permission, like a couple different use cases that people have as pain points is like, one, you don't own all your data. So if you're like a big influencer, like Bankless, they got kicked off of YouTube, immediately lost 100,000 subscribers, all of their content libraries. Like that's really big use case for them to want some backup there. Then there's just like general users where if they perhaps have something that isn't, content that the centralized entity approves of, and you want some censorship there, and it's almost like a weighting system of how much people care about each thing to make them willingness to move. And so DSO was trying to do this to some extent fairly well, where they tried incentivizing people to shift over by kind of monetizing people in a way. It got pretty dystopian, where like you can you get to keep all your data, so kind of good for those influencers that have 100,000 people, so they don't have to worry about any centralized. So, like your entire network stays there, but there's no privacy, and the way all of it is paid for is by people kind of paying to continue to see you in a way, and they did that by like a betting market on people. kind of dystopian, but it kind of worked effectively. And then there's another group called Lens that I actually have a couple folks that are heading some of the teams there, and they're Aave social media, and their approach is very interesting, where they're trying to attack some of those big influencer groups and shift them over to Aave. Like, in my personal opinion, I think it's what I'm seeing most from these groups working on it is they're trying to attack that like network effects and incentivization problem. It's like, how do you get people to shift? Because everyone wants it, but there's not big enough network effects on these new networks, so it's kind of like a cold start problem. That's at least what I'm seeing and what I've heard from the folks working on it, and it's been interesting where one kind of tried to do like a betting market to start, and you want to get in early because then people's specific prices will be low, and then their prices increase with their follower count. And then the other Lens one tried to leverage kind of those influencers that really do have a big need for getting away from the centralized entities that could deplatform at any instance, and hoping that those crowds that they attracted would follow them to the new networks. So those are the kind of two approaches I've seen, and I think it's kind of interesting that we brought up like Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook too, because Facebook really started as a campus. It was just for colleges to start. They kind of solved their cold start problem that way. So I think probably the first thing will be, what's the best way to solve this cold start problem? Because everyone wants it, but no one wants to go to an empty network, right?
Yeah, that's wow. I have found that to be the curse of a lot of like NFT projects as well. It's like, I mean, it's honestly the issue that every single person with any sort of company of sorts service that they are selling or that they want people to use is trying to deal with. And the funny thing is, you never have any idea what's going to all of a sudden take off. I don't know if you guys remember in 2000, I think it was like 1918, there was that random app where at noon, it was basically Jeopardy. And at noon Pacific time every day, you would like play like 3 rounds of this Jeopardy or something. It was huge in San Francisco. It was so weird. And it lasted for maybe like 2 months or maybe 1 month, right? And then people just completely gave up on it. Or like Pokemon Go, people just like randomly ran to it and they were like, oh no, we're not using this anymore. And so it's like the cold start problem is almost, it's better than having like an initial huge rush which you can't handle. But on the other hand, yeah, I'm not going to go to an empty social network and post statuses for myself or for 2 other people. So that's really interesting. Josh, I'll let you kind of take over right now for like 10 or so minutes, however you feel, to talk more about your project, talk more about like, talk more about this Oracle idea.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the last one, I noticed a lot of projects are starting out saying, how do we get rid of like advertising? We wanted social networks without advertising and things like that, and controlled content. And I do notice nobody has solved that yet, but it does seem to be a goal that a lot of projects I see working on are trying to figure out. Because the other thing is, if you start paying for content, then you have people with money starting to control what's being said. And then like if somebody starts talking for people without money, then they're not going to have as big of a voice because they're not going to have enough. They're not going to get the donations and stuff. So it's pretty tough. So for the project that I'm working on, I'll start out with the bigger picture and then go down to like where it actually is currently. I thought of a way to use AI with along with blockchain and figure out how to run AI calculations on an Oracle. So that way you could take your Web 2 presence, the AI could go through your history, create a profile of you, and then match it to other people in the system that sign up for this and say, oh, you both have interests in golf or whatever. And or more pertinent, like you both write JavaScript, and you're both interested in Web3, so you guys get matched, and basically you would have an Aleo identity that gets tied to, so that way you would start chatting with somebody on your Aleo identity, and it would just tell you what you were looking for. Like, so let's say you want to build an app in the Aleo community and you don't know many people.
you could go on here, say, hey, I'm a front end developer. I know JavaScript. I know this. I need somebody who knows Rust and whatever to build the back end. You could be matched with that person, start communicating with them, and potentially even somebody in your area you could meet up with in real life, and you could start working on a project together, or you could collaborate online. And if you turn it into a business venture, you already have your Aleo identities that you'd be using. You could use Aleo to handle payments and things like that. So when you, as your project takes off, you could form a DAO on the blockchain, and you would have your voting rights, and everything's tied to this identity. And it's an identity where you have full control over it. Nobody else. It's not like a GitHub account where some other company actually owns the identity and can kick you off, or control your account in some way, or like, YouTube demonetizing or YouTube kicking people off their platform. That couldn't happen because this you're the owner of your identity. So what ideally is the Oracle would do is just run down, and initially we're just going to do something simple like Myers-Briggs personality test or something like that, just to easily match people. But the algorithm would be open source, so people could add to it, they could change it. And since decentralization is a big part of this, the models that are used, you can download and you can run them from within your browser. So instead of having an Oracle that needs a lot of funding to run these heavy calculations, people can download these trained models, and they can manage all their data within their browser, so they know that the Oracle isn't gathering extra data. They could submit the profile back to the Oracle, and the Oracle matches the users. And so you don't know what so you could be chatting with somebody, you don't know what their username is. You don't know like their Twitter handle or whatever their information was pulled from. You don't know what that is. You just know that you have an interest together, and you start building your network that way. If you want to turn it into like the other benefit is, if you think about like what we call like, Facebook or any of the big ones, they're pretty much just an evolution of the bulletin board systems from the 90s. If anybody, was around back then that remembers what the internet was like, Reddit is pretty much just a nicer UI on the old school bulletin board systems. Twitter, Facebook, they're just a feed with that stores your data. Well, you can use IPFS, interplanetary file system, to store your data. You could create your own network. Somebody creates like a stream that looks like Twitter or Facebook feed. That can be copied, and the information that comes up could be tailored around a small group of people. Like, it doesn't have to be this sprawling, like, oh, we have 2 billion people on our network, and you're still only seeing, there's only so much stuff that you could that you can see. So the idea is that, like, if you use something like decentralized storage, like interplanetary file system, you can pay to store your own data. So you say, well, I'm going to be storing so many gigabytes of data, and I want to pay for the next 10 years. There's a price that you can pay to do that, and it'll be stored, and you don't have to maintain a server, and your data will live on. And at some point, like, there's certain things, like, for instance, if you're talking about, like, I use the example of the Will Smith slap. For a week, everybody talked about it, but, like, now nobody wants to hear about it. Why do we have to store all those conversations going forward in perpetuity? Like, are we going to go back and read through the millions and billions of comments that were made about this event that, was significant for a couple days and then it filtered out? So versus, like, if I'm asking somebody how to do something technical, like, how do I link a wallet to this app? That's something that should live on, because in 2 years from now, somebody else might have that same problem, and you get like a Stack Overflow situation where, like, you're answering a question that later on, and this is one of the things I used to love about Reddit, is somebody would ask a question and a couple years later you could stumble on it and there's the answer with like a bunch of conversation that is useful. So those things can be differentiated, and so you would have a less volume of things that persist into the future, but the more important things would be able to live on. And so how you do this is like those are all not worked out yet. Like it's kind of the right now it's a pie in the sky. It's saying, hey, this is where we want to get to. The reality is that just the tools to build this stuff aren't really there yet. Like for instance, if we want to build this decentralized server, this decentralized Oracle, well, we have to. There's something called a three-way handshake where the prover, the Oracle, and the user all shake hands with each other, and they so that way information can be passed. We can say, okay, the Oracle is passing this information to the user, and it's verified that that is the correct information, but it's not exposed what that information is, making it zero knowledge. That has to be implemented, and it's very low level, very kind of mundane and boring in the scope of things, but there's a million of those steps that have to be taken before we can start getting to these higher level of people dreaming up new ways to use things. Like for instance, the Leo language needs to be worked out more before we can actually start implementing this, because to do the zero knowledge parts of this, we need the Leo language. And without having the Leo language in place and having a robust ecosystem that we can start building this, we can't even start demonstrating ideas that can see success or failure in the marketplace. Like, I can talk about these things, but I can't actually demonstrate them. So,
right.
Where the project is now is just saying, hey, what small piece can we prove out of this larger idea? But I would imagine that, like, social networks, they're interesting to follow the ideas, the ways that people are looking at monetization. But I do think, it's probably a few years out before we're going to start seeing who's going to, like, what type of system is going to overtake what's there now.
Yeah, nice. And I'll just ask quickly. There's a question that a few people are asking in the Q&A for you, Josh, just about storing the data. Would you rely on decentralized cloud services for that?
I mean, so I don't know. I know from what I know about IPFS is the way that they kind of break up your storage. I think there's like redundancy and stuff like that, but I don't know. I don't know enough about it to know how it would work at a large stream. But I think the idea that all of us have storage that we don't use on our computers, that can be monetized by somebody can store their information, but the only thing is that, you might stop using that laptop or sell it or wipe it and get rid of everything on it. So I don't know fully how that, I like the IPFS project the best so far. I don't know another one that compares with that. But I do think, this idea of if we're saying, hey, we're going to talk about stuff that's not really that important. That sort of stuff, I think should be stored on decentralized file systems. I think the more important stuff that you want to keep and you want to persist for years, that should probably still have structure and backups.
Yeah, totally. So, cool. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I'm just going to give it to Matt real quick. Matt, anything you want to plug, talk about, tell us, whatever. We've really enjoyed you being here. I know we don't have too much time, so kind of want to give you the floor for a bit. Any last thoughts that you have?
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed talking about this, and just similar to the decentralized storage conversations and kind of where we're at on the project. So we've been working with the Aleo team officially with grants since around the end of April, beginning of May. And in that time, as was already mentioned, Leo isn't quite ready, so full programmability around privacy isn't there yet, but we've had our hands full with some of the data availability issues and how to manage off-chain storage for retrieval, what our users really want for that, and what's kind of like their threshold. So kind of if you think about like private social networks right now, like these centralized entities track everything you do, screen time, how long you watch every single video, and then use that to feed some ad algorithm that makes money on their ad marketplace. So we've had to figure out, okay, with like these programmable privacy tools that we're helping build, what is the needs of our users? What do they want? What optionality should we focus on building first? And how should we go about doing that? So as far as progress that we've kind of made on that front, we have worked through what our initial like users want, and they want the data to be available to them, but for it to be completely private to like the outside world from the start. So if we're using any off-chain solution like IPFS and Filecoin, we have to manage kind of the pinning of that data, how we need to monetize the usage of that, and like the amount that it takes to actually like keep that data available for the users, and then also how to encrypt it off-chain so that it's not encrypted transactions via Aleo, and then off-chain it's unencrypted, so we have to work through the encryption of both. And you know, the good thing about encryption on something like something like IPFS and Filecoin is that you don't have to do it with EVM keys or anything. You could use the same Aleo keys, so that is some stuff that we've been working through on our end while we wait for Leo, and are excited about some announcements coming this week with Leo and Testnet 3.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Matt. That's awesome. Matt and Josh, thank you both so much for doing these kind of community call chats. This is fun for us. We like having different voices. We like having different opinions. I also like just discussing these things, and I hope it's helpful for the community as well to kind of start thinking about different ways that like privacy can just be integrated into the things you see. Matt, I'll let you jump off if you have a place to be. For the last 5 minutes, we're just going to do good old Discord community stuff. So no need to stick around, but I will now bring up Dima to talk about the infographic competition. It's July 19th, so it is going to be over in the next 10 days, I think. But the floor is yours, Dima.
Hello, I will be very quick.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Yes, first of all, it's important to participate because we have very cool prizes. Aleo points, merch, rolls, all that you love. So, but even if you don't win in contest, participation gives you a huge plus in your job, a huge plus in your profile for the ambassador program, and all you guys need to join infographic competition. And please don't make a slideshow. We need a beautiful and original infographics that Aleo can be proud to use in its promotion in Twitter, in Instagram, Medium, and other services.
Cool.
So now we have more than 40 participants, and the number is growing. That's very cool, but it is not enough, and there should be many more participants. I hope 150 and more. And now, who has not already made an infographic, let's quickly think and do it, please.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
If I mispronounced your name, I'm so sorry. Is it Dima?
Yes.
Oh, good. Phew. Nailed it. Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, you guys, I think that just about wraps up. Let me check the Q&A real quick. Cool. I want to do more of these conversations because you guys are a very interesting bunch, and you guys have. Did I already say this? I think I'm repeating myself. It's 104 degrees in Paris. Brains do not work as well as they do in the cold. Um, okay. I think on that note we can call it. In terms of community updates, we have the infographic competition, as you just heard, and we have some cool updates happening at ECC. I'm going to see if I can live stream one tomorrow specifically for you guys. I'm getting word on that. If so, I will post on the Discord, and otherwise, we will share all updates here from the conference, and it's gonna be exciting. That's all I'm gonna say. So, thank you all once again, all 127 of you. Nick, always a pleasure to see you on these community calls, hear you. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
Hi, everyone. Good seeing you.